This is exciting to be all in person. I am Kathy Chang, the co-president of Columbia University Entertainment. Oh, thank you. When I'm not moderating panels, I work in independent film, focusing on film financing, and I'm also a screenwriter, which is why I'm really incredibly excited to interview these two storytellers and showrunners, Lang Fisher and Melinda Hsu Taylor. And this is an amazing turnout because of our panelists, obviously. We obviously know who you are, but I'm going to give your quick bio. So both of these women are triple threats as award-winning writers, producers, and directors. Lang most recently co-created and executive produced Netflix's Never Have I Ever with Mindy Kaling. Lang has also been a writer-producer on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Mindy Project, and a staff writer on 30 Rock. Melinda is executive producer of Nancy Drew, was co-creator showrunner of Tom Swift. Both on the CW, her TV credits include Lost, The Vampire Diaries, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and Medium. All right, so let's have a round of applause just for these amazing achievements. Okay, so to start off, I have an icebreaker. Never Have I Ever famously has John McEnroe as omniscient narrator to a teen girl. So Nancy Drew also delves into teen voice, although it skews slightly older. So what were you two like as teens? And if you could pick, who would be your narrator to tell your deepest thoughts and secrets?
So I was glancing at the email that you sent to preface all of these questions, and the name that popped into my head was Gandalf, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. And then I thought, no, Galadriel, that's cooler.
I mean, as a teenager, I was a real teen in the 90s, and I feel like my dream narrator at that time would have been like Janine Garofalo. Like I wanted like a funny lady in my head. And as a teenager, I think I sort of had like that 90s like wanting to be like a little edgy and like wanting to be like a little like dangerous, but wasn't at all. Like was just a loser. But like hoped like there was some like intrigue around me, which there wasn't. So like part of it would have been like Janine Garofalo because I loved comedy, but also like another part of it would have been like, you know, like the ladies from The Craft, like. So, you know, somewhere in there.
You're really into the goth Lang.
Well, yeah, now certainly. I've definitely kept that up.
Melinda, what were you like as a teenager?
Alone.
As all writers are.
Yeah,
yes.
I was very shy. I was really timid. That lasted pretty much until my senior year of high school. I had outlets with music because I was a pianist, and I did a lot of musical theater, and I started to come out of my shell there. But all the way through my childhood, I mean, it's no coincidence that I actually did cite, with seriousness, Gandalf and Galadriel. I read The Lord of the Rings over and over again as a kid because in those books, if you were different, it was cool. I grew up in Maine. Nobody looked like me, and I was very self-conscious about that. And I think that's why I gravitate towards genre writing because, you know, as an outsider or as somebody who's like in a heightened circumstance, you can still save the world. You can be a hobbit. You can be, you know, somebody who's not the typical person and yet find value in the group.
Yes. Oh, I love that. So I wanted to talk about breaking in. Lang, you went to Columbia College. You did improv for the Varsity Show. You also tried stand-up. And where did your love
Tried it.
There was a podcast
Did
where
not
that
succeed.
Was the quote. Yeah. But so did you always love comedy? Where did your love of comedy come from?
I mean, I think just going back to my earlier comment, I feel like comedy comes from a place when you try very hard to be cool and you fail, and then you are like, oh, well, somebody needs to be the person who's aware that this is like embarrassing, and you like start to just like kind of change your identity in that direction. Like I feel like in middle school I was like, no, I'm like a leading lady. Like I'm like pretty serious. And then you're just like slowly realize that that's not your deal. And I don't know. I always have loved comedy. I think I don't remember being a funny kid. Like I don't remember that. But friends of mine who have known me for a long time described me that way. But I think in my own mind, I was like, a beautiful ethereal star is on the rise. And then like that. And then you hit puberty and you're like, oh, oh, this is different than what I thought it was going to be. And then, I mean, I've always just loved it. I've always, grew up on SNL, loved Seinfeld and The Simpsons and, Strangers with Candy and really loved weird out there kind of comedies. And then I started working in the, a few years after I got out of college and at The Onion and really never saw myself actually as a writer. I always kind of felt like I was a performer. And then a friend of mine who I actually went to Columbia with, was working at The Onion, and he was like, we're starting up this video series, and we need writers, and we're thinking that we'll use improvisers for that. And so I went to, I started working at The Onion kind of on a part-time basis as an improviser, but was very nervous and scared about not being a good enough writer to do that. And, it was a very intimidating room, and, but it taught me so much, and it mostly taught me how to not care if things that you write get thrown in the trash. That was the biggest thing. But yeah, I think I've always kind of loved comedy. That was a long answer. Sorry.
Yeah, but you're good at killing your babies, which I feel like is hard as a writer.
You have to.
And so, Melinda, you broke in a different way, which is you moved to LA after School of the Arts, and you applied for the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop with a spec script, a Law and Order spec script, and you got plucked out of obscurity because that is a very competitive program. Do you remember what your episode was about?
Yeah, I do distinctly. At the time, I came out of Columbia, and I was kind of wanting to write the Great American Screenplay, do an indie film, or maybe do a novel, and that's what I had been trained to do at the School of the Arts. And I was struggling in obscurity. It had been 7 years. I was working all these terrible jobs, like short order cook in a bar. I was a tour guide at Warner Brothers driving the golf cart. I was an office manager actually, that was a great job, the architecture. But the guy I was dating at the time said, you should apply for this thing called the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop. It's for TV writers. You write fast. You get along with people. And I was like, oh, I don't even watch TV. I work alone, And he cajoled me into it. And I finally was like, well, it's $30. I guess I could bang out a Law and Order spec. And I picked Law and Order because at the time, I will date myself. I'm starting to embrace my actual age instead of trying to hide. I didn't want to go to Blockbuster to rent something. So I was like, well, what's on every night? Law and Order. Great. I'll get a yellow pad. I sat down, and I was like, let me analyze the structure of this thing. Okay. 0 seconds. 2 guys moving a couch. They're complaining about the wife. They're complaining, oh, my God, a body. 30 seconds. And here come the cops, and there are no defensive wounds on her hands. She knew her attacker. The lividity shows you that the body was moved. We believe that she's been dead so many hours. Somebody makes a joke about traffic. Titles. 1 minute. And I charted the entire Law & Order episode. And I also was like, well, shoot, they caught the guy. It's only 8:30. What are we going to do now? Oh, Law & Order. So I constructed something very much on the structure of what I had observed. And it was about a Vietnam vet who was accused of murder. Turns out he wasn't guilty, and it was actually his son. And then Natalie Chaidez, who still works in the industry, is a wonderful person. She was my first mentor through the program. She elevated it so many levels by helping me out and really pulling out the threads of the themes. And she was kind of like, I bet you can do a thing about PTSD being passed from father to son. And it turns out there is such a thing. And she wrote me this letter, which I'll never forget. She said, I want you to succeed. And no one had said that to me, ever, especially not in Hollywood. And I always treasured that. Long way of saying, I think that the pace of the Law and Order was kind of clipping along, and sometimes when I read specs now, you can kind of tell the difference between one that is a quick pace spec and one that's kind of meandering, and this act is only 3 pages long, and then it's kind of like you can tell if somebody has paid attention to TV structure, which is important. It's more carpentry than watercolor.
Working steadily, you both landed quite quickly, I feel like, on some iconic TV shows. Melinda, you were co-producer writer for the 5th season of Lost, and then promoted to producer for 6th and final season. And then Lang, after 6 years at The Onion, your first TV writing gig was on the final season of 30 Rock. So these are obviously super acclaimed, high-profile shows. How did you settle in and find your footing in what I imagine were pretty established writers' rooms?
You can go first.
I feel like, I really count my blessings that I was at The Onion, because The Onion was our like job was to write like 100 headlines, every day, and then you threw 99 of them out. And like sometimes you threw 100 of them out, and it was just you became this like person who had to like generate a lot of stuff, and you just had to slowly not take it personally when things weren't going your way. And then when I got 30 Rock, I mean, it had already won so many awards. It was like the comedy to be on. And I remember being so incredibly nervous on my first day, but I kept like telling myself that I was like, this is a job. You are paid to do this job. If you were like a dump truck driver, you would have to drive the dump truck. Like you would have to like, empty the dump truck, fill the dump truck with dirt. That's what you're being paid to do. You cannot walk into this room and be dead silent. Like even if you're wrong, you have to pitch ideas and you have to try. And I was like very green, but I went in and I was like sweaty and like I was just like so just awkward, and I was the only new person on the staff. There was like no other new writers. It was only me, not even new assistants. Like I was the only new person, and it was like they all had so many inside jokes, and everyone was like a really, really sharp comedy writer. A lot of Harvard Lampoon people, and I was just like, I'm going to just force myself to talk. And so I did. And I remember this guy who I had kind of known previously, who was a writer on the show, like sent me an email that night. And he was like, you just talked more in your first day than I talked in my first 2 weeks. And I was like, is that bad? I'm like, I don't know if that's good. But I just kept doing it. I just kept being like, here's a joke pitch, and I just kept trying. And I knew when I wasn't really my job to speak, and I tried to, but I made sure I pitched like at least once an hour throughout the day until I got more comfortable. And it's like, luckily because of The Onion, I had 6 years of training in just joke pitching. And so, I mean, I don't know how much I got in that final season, but I do know that like as a showrunner now, when I see like a staff writer start and they're locked up and they like can't pitch because, comedy rooms that's it. That your job as a staff writer is not to do the story. It's not to fix the story. It's to learn about story, but it is to pitch jokes. And like when I see them get locked up, I really do try to pull those staff writers aside and just be like, just go for it. Like, just try. Even if it bombs, just try. It doesn't matter. And I think when people get it out of their head, because especially for women, I've seen, before my show, every show I had worked on was a Harvard Lampoon run, really like intense, like comedy room. And I saw a lot of like young women just like go inside themselves, like, and just shut down. And some men too. I mean, it was like, staff writers just like tended to like get like beaten down in some of those rooms. And I feel like I was like, when I have my room, I don't want anyone to feel like that. I don't want anyone to like not have their shot. And there are people who are, it doesn't mean everybody's going to be a great comedy writer, but everyone deserves the shot to try as hard as they can and to learn and to get better.
Well, that's amazing. I feel like you would be an amazing mentor to work for. So.
Sarah, what do you think? Great.
So Melinda, what about you? What was your experience working on Lost?
Well, by the time I joined it was the first time that people had engaged with the show in this very personal way. Like the fans around the world were constantly, deciphering and parsing every little thing we did. And there was so much secrecy. Although, like, when we had the finale of the series on the whiteboards, there was a break-in and people stole the TVs but left the whiteboards on. It was hilarious. So I guess not everybody cared about the secrets. But the thing that I think helped me was that I have a really good memory. And right before getting the interview, or right before going in for the meeting, I watched all of Lost back to back. And I was like, you know, such a...
I did that with 30 Rock, too.
Yeah.
It made me insane.
Oh, totally. You know, I drank the Kool-Aid, and I loved Lost. It was a thrill, and this is a great way to take a meeting. Like, by the time I got around to actually walking in the door, I deeply cared whether I got the job, but mostly on my brain was thinking, I'm about to be Dana Carlton, you know, and that they liked that energy, which anybody would. If you're coming in to work on a, you know, a late season of a show that's been kind of dragged through a lot of iterations, a lot of different storylines, and, you know, it's a very complicated world, and somebody comes in and they're fresh-eyed and, you know, very excited and genuinely loves the thing that you're all working hard together on. That was really helpful. So I was able to connect dots that's really helpful in a show like Lost and say, you know, like, well, didn't Faraday write in his journal, Desmond will be my constant if anything goes wrong. He should knock on the door of the Swan. You know, I think I said that the first day. And so people were, like, impressed with that. And to me, it was just like I'd been living in that for weeks, immersing myself. So it wasn't weird for me to just pull that bit of knowledge. The other thing I think I did was I learned to kind of gravitate towards the people in the room who were a little more like me, just temperamentally. You know, there were some big personalities in that room. It was stressful. And it was a great learning experience. It was kind of amazing to be part of, like when we went to Comic-Con, it was like being with the Rolling Stones, you know, but like I didn't have to go up on stage. It was just like, wow, I'm with the band. And it was so cool. I loved that. I loved, you know, the fans were very sincere in their love for the show, and it was really cool to see what they came up with. And then another thing that I did, I wouldn't tell a young woman to do this now, but I hid the fact that I had kids for weeks and weeks.
Wow.
I just had a baby when I went in for the interview. And the thing is that I had my first kid during my first year as a staff writer on Medium. Kind of came back for the second year and struggled through, but they kept telling me, like, oh, don't worry about it. You know, just come back at your own pace. It's totally cool. We're not expecting anything from you. And then a few months in, it was kind of like, why haven't we heard you pitch? You know, and also I realized now that my baby was colicky and I was incredibly sleep deprived, and I just had no idea which way was up. So that was really unfortunate. But having been through that experience, and also had gone to, like, this one meeting after having my younger son, Jackson, and I remembered that I had been so searching for a shirt that wouldn't make me look pregnant. So I found this kind of very chiffon-y thing, which is very pretty. But now I think about it, I'm like, I would only wear that if I were going to pitch a project as a producer. I would never wear this to a writer's meeting. And, you know, I had it over jeans. And it was kind of, it was a nice look, but it was way too formal for a writer's meeting. And it was way too formal to meet with Josh Applebaum, who's a really nice guy. But he was staffing for Life on Mars. And there was a guy in the waiting room who went 20 minutes into my meeting time. And the two of them were laughing and laughing and laughing. And then finally, this guy comes out. He's wearing a black T-shirt, jeans, white sneakers. Josh Applebaum's wearing a ratty, like, baseball shirt, ripped up jeans, scuffed up Converse. And I was like, these motherfuckers just rolled out of bed and just grabbed whatever was on top of their dresser pile. And I had this Kate Spade purse with brass things on the bottom. And the look on Josh's face when I turned up in the doorway after his chatty, you know, black shirt companion guy, his face was like, Mom, you know. I really wanted to, like, go home right then, but I went inside and I put my good Kate Spade purse down on the glass table, and the brass things made this sound like ka-chunk, you know. and for
like
years,
Melinda's arrived.
oh my God, for years I did not carry a purse ever. Tonight was actually kind of rare because this doesn't really have great pockets, but I still, like, I have some meetings tomorrow. I'm not going to carry a purse. It's just I'm also kind of klutzy. It's too many things to manage. But the my takeaway from that was, hide that you have kids. Hide, hide, hide. So I went in, I found a better shirt at the Gap. By then, you know, I had lost a little bit more baby weight, and it was just sort of blousy. And I went in, had a great meeting, they hired me. I went into the job, did not talk about kids, did not talk about my personal life. And, you know, like a month into the job, somebody came by with kids. And I was like, oh yeah, I love kids. My kid is like 8 weeks old. And they were like, you have a baby? And I was like, I have also a toddler. I mean, I just, like, I felt comfortable enough a few weeks in to admit that I had children. So that was the reality at the time. So I don't think it's quite like that anymore.
I think it's amazing you were able to juggle. So I want to talk about the transition to showrunning. Lang, is this something you've written many seasons on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Mindy Project? Were you always building towards showrunning, or is it something that came from your working relationship with Mindy Kaling?
I mean, I think, like, most TV writers are working towards showrunning. I think it's like you want the chance to create something and put it on the air. With that being said, it's like the roughest job. It's like, oh, this is the pinnacle of our existence, and it's like torture. But with that being said, it's also like I don't want to be in charge. I love being the boss. So it's like this, funny conundrum. But I think, you set out, I think, and you try to learn as much as you can from every show you're on, and then hopefully take those things to whatever show you're going to be on. I mean, I remember, because I kind of came up, I was in New York for a long time, and I was friends with a lot of comedians when I was trying to do stand-up and failing. But I moved out here with a bunch of, around the same time as a bunch of New York comedians who were all like, I'm going to try my hand at comedy writing and stuff. And so we were all kind of in the same spot. But I remember so many people who had never worked on a staff before being like, yeah, I'm just pitching a show right now. I'm probably just gonna be a showrunner and I don't know, just have eight seasons of the show I'm making. And it was I never wanted to rush into showrunning. I knew it was hard, and I knew that I wanted to wait until I knew what I was doing before I got a chance to have my own show, because in addition to just wanting to be a good enough writer to do it, showrunning is this insane transition from writing, because you're a writer, you're I 1000% agree that television writing is carpentry. It is it's a math problem more than it is a modern dance. Yeah. It is truly it is so technical. But at the same time, you're still sort of a creative spirit when you're in the room, and you don't have the weight of the show on your shoulders. And then the minute you have a show on the air, you become not only responsible for the creative writing part of that, but you're just the CEO of a 200-person company all of a sudden, and you're spending all this time in HR meetings and learning about, our show. I also I have a son too, but I was pregnant for the first season of our show, and just waddling around the lot being there's going to be a strike in the IATSE people, or you're choosing backpacks for everybody, or you're there's so many, you're just making decisions all day long. And so it's just this totally different muscle. And it's incredibly stressful. And I think for those people who have not spent enough time on sets or in rooms, or haven't worked their way up properly, the pressure tends to break people, and people who have worked their way up properly. And that can come out in cruelty to the people who work under you. And there are, as I'm sure many of you in here know, there are TV shows that are famously poorly run and full of drama, and everyone hates everyone. And you never want that to be your show. You don't want other shows to be you don't want to go over there. It is a hot mess, and you also are beholden to the studios and your network and all those executives who want you to bring things under budget and to have a plan and make sure things come in time. And then I'm sure you also had to deal with COVID on top of that. So we were one of the first shows back with COVID. Actor Adam Shapiro from Never Have I Ever is here. He plays Mr. Shapiro, the same name as his name.
That delights me to no end.
And I was trying to make 10 episodes of TV and being what if our transpo guy dies of COVID? You're just so scared that you're going to kill someone on your set that's about, a teen girl wanting to get kissed. You're nobody deserves to die for this. So I don't know that, but anyways, like it's just this bigger thing. But now that I've done it and I feel proud of what we made, like that's all I want to do. And I think, you learn so much just about making stuff when you're the showrunner.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I find it really satisfying to get very global. For instance, on Nancy Drew and Tom Swift, I said, we're not doing guns. There are no guns on screen. Nobody holds a gun. Nobody talks about a gunshot wound. There are no guns on the set deck. No posters of guns. No discussion of an old crime. And that was really intentional and really meaningful to me. I did a lot of soul searching after the Sandy Hook massacre. My kids were about that age, and I was like, I am contributing to this culture. I can't say I'd never consume it. I'm not a total vegan about the thing, but I don't want to create shows that are about that. And it is very helpful in looking at what I want to do next, because Nancy Drew has ended, or it's about to end with, we're in post-production still. And people ask, what's your next project? Are you staying at CBS? And I'm like, if you put aside the Star Trek universe, I also give lasers a pass, but if you put aside the Star Trek universe, which I hear is a little bit dysfunctional, I don't think I want to go there. What show on CBS does not involve a straight cisgender person holding a gun? Mm-hmm. Maybe 2. I'm just pulling that number out of the air. But the dramas, I can't think offhand other than like The Good Fight and maybe something else. Nobody ever has a gun. At any rate, so I was really glad to have that global impact. I was able to put into practice a lot of the management thoughts I'd had over many years of coming up the trenches and gritting my teeth and, being in these very toxic environments and feeling like it would have been so easy to say thank you. It would have been so easy to return that actor's email. Why are you not returning her email? She's number 2 on the call sheet, And people would they would fall into the worst passive-aggressive tendencies. It would bring out the worst in people sometimes, the stress. And it is a lot of stress. There's no discounting that. However, there are all these little joys, like today we were in the music spot. So for the episode that I directed, I was like watching the music, and there was a transition between 2 scenes. And I said, could you make it so that the conclusion of this little bar of music sounds like it's not resolved yet? So it feels like it's pushing us into the next part of the act. Because right now it feels like the act is ending and like, oh no, there's another set piece coming. So just like asking the composer to change the direction of a melody line, you can get that granular, and it's so satisfying. It's really fun. And then managing people, I actually like managing. It is stressful. That's the hardest part of the job. They don't say to you how often you'll be fielding random text messages from set. Somebody's mad at somebody, or somebody's in a bad mood, or you think you've done everything you possibly can to please everybody. You've worked so hard. You've devoted night and day and hours and hours and hours to thinking about the series finale, and you get a call on a Saturday afternoon. And it's like, oh, what now? You're like, but despite all of the wellspring of kindness and compassion you try to build up, it's like, right. Can I not just have this one fucking Saturday afternoon without a phone call from somebody who wants to swap the order of these scenes because they think that it's like, maybe not. Or we ultimately did it. It was actually the right way to go, but it was that feeling that you get as a parent also, where it's kind of like, I've done 100 things in every direction at 2,000% for everybody, and I'm completely scooped out from the inside, and yet they want more. And right. I'm going to have to produce more from the husk of myself and do my best and keep a civil tongue.
So you guys, it's basically your job is never done when you're showrunner is what it feels like.
You're never done.
But I love it.
Yeah, and it's true. Like, I love it too. I mean, I've just finished post, so I'm like sort of in like a hiatus time where I've like gone to the dentist now. And like, I'm like, the good old days of writing endless paragraphs. But yeah, I mean, it's, I think also when you're a mom, you are like, you feel like you have zero time that's yours because you're doing everything for the show. And then it's like, I need to allot these hours to like focus on my child. And then it's like, I'm going to focus on my child. The child goes to sleep. I go back to the computer, and right. You're just like going all the time. And then, occasionally the stress will come out in interesting ways. Like I've definitely cried in front of my writers and like been like, I don't know, like maybe this like isn't a good episode. And everyone's like, pull it together, woman. Like it's just, I think, but at the same time, you get to like when you're doing those little finishing touches or getting to direct and like seeing this stuff come to life and seeing these characters embodied and like there's so much fun that happens too, and like there's so many things that you're so excited for, like right. There's these like exciting moments that you can't wait to put music to or to cut together, and like when you see it you're like, yes, This is great. And my show is like particularly like it's funny. It's like it's kind of 3 shows in one. And it's like the 3 shows I kind of like, which is like it's a hard comedy. There's a ton of jokes. It also is like a kind of a loving family tale, you know, and I lost my dad. And so some of that is like cathartic for me because it's about a girl who lost her dad.
Amazing.
And then it's like, then has all the trappings of the teen show that I like wanted like as a teen. Like I'm just like, ooh, I know what the things I like if I were like 15 right now that I would like rewind, rewatch, and like I know how to hit those like moments with music. And I know like if I make this kid climb through a window and he is rain soaked, and like then like every teen girl is just gonna be like, bah.
Yeah.
So like.
That is on target.
So that's like I was like those are the moments where I was like, yes, nailed it.
I love that, and because of that, I felt the teen girl in me watching your show. So
Yeah.
both of you are in your 4th and final seasons of your current series, and I think that's a testament to how much people love, you know, your characters. And I wanted to talk about conceptualizing your main characters. Melinda, Nancy Drew is obviously such an iconic character. The books are 90 years old, but this is a very specific iteration of paranormal mysteries. She's much more sophisticated. She's having sex, and it's more for like a Riverdale audience. How did you make this character your own since you came on as EP when the pilot was already greenlit?
Right. Noga Landau created the show, and it's entirely to her credit that she wanted to use it as a metaphor for the Me Too movement in the first season, because there's a kind of he said, she said situation. I won't spoil it, but it's very central to the ghost storyline that year. The second season was about mental health and Nancy's struggles with depression and kind of not realizing how it had taken a hold of her life. And we externalized that in a monster, which we had to then vanquish at the end of the season, because that's how we do it. And then the third season was kind of the sins of the past. We had this great character who was a 200-year-old witch who kind of came back to the present day and, you know, caused a lot of mischief and was trying to end the world, that sort of thing. We stopped her, and then in the fourth season, we told a story that was really about the erasure of history. This is coming out soon, I hope. We don't have a premiere date yet, but I'm guessing it might be spring-ish. And it's really an answer to folks who don't want certain things taught in school, who don't want certain books on the shelves. And Noga is very, like, she's got a soul of a warrior. It's pretty great. And she was like, I want to tell a metaphor for that. I want to hold people accountable. I want to talk about how we have to heal ourselves and acknowledge what's going on. And so having those lenses to view the seasons through made it easy in a lot of ways to have Nancy have a very dimensional and kind of sophisticated view of the world. I think where I was able to come in is to add, I think, depth to some of the other characters. For instance, there's her Chinese character, her friend George Fan, instead of George. I'm forgetting now what the character's name is in the books, but she was a white girl, like they all were. And Noga and Fake Empire very intentionally made the cast very diverse, which was fantastic. And I was able to put in a lot of specificity in the Fan family. I named all the sisters.
Mom is hilarious.
Oh my God, she's so great. She's so great. And then, you know, we had a black character who's her boyfriend at first, and then they break up, and then she gets a new boyfriend. There were a lot of, you know, dating situations for Nancy. So those were always ways to make her specific to what she was going through as a person, but also to speak to relationship issues that people generally have. And I think that the older characters, really, also leaning into the parent stuff. I think that often if you see a scene on Nancy Drew where grown-ups are talking about grown-up stuff, I might have done a pass on the scene, you know? It's kind of like one of the things you do as a showrunner. I kind of feel like, you know, the dads wouldn't talk like that. Or I also, I really like doing the structure of it, and I think if you can provide good structure for those things to play out, then it's really helpful to let the other things breathe. I mean, it's not exactly an answer on how to make Nancy specific, because Noga really had it in her head, how Nancy should be. But I think, if anything, I might have pulled back from the Riverdale instincts. You know, if you watch the pilot, there's a lot more, you know, hot and sweaty teens with their clothes off than there is in the average episode that followed. And maybe that's just my demure nature. But I don't know. I think that was important for her. Yeah, for her to, that was how she expressed her feelings of grief and just wanting to forget things. She would hop into bed with somebody. And we explored that too, you know.
So, Lang, I want to talk about conceptualizing Davy, the main character. I just think when you watch it, she's such a fun, well-rounded character because she does things where you're like going, oh no, but then you still love her. And she's boy crazy, but she's super smart. How did you just construct that character? And then how did it change? Like, was it hard to change her through the seasons, or how did that work?
I mean, I think Davy is. Mindy and I kind of figured her out. We sort of came from a place of who were we as teenagers. And I think neither one of us was particularly cool, but we weren't wallflowers either. Like, we weren't, like, I feel like a lot of times in, like teen shows you see like a girl who's like on the outside and like can't speak up and is like so shy, and like Mindy and I were never that. We had like big personalities. I'm sure people thought we were annoying, like but it's just like we both talk too much, and like, we wanted to show a girl, and I think it was important for Mindy to show like, a South Asian girl who wasn't just like, demure and like diffident. Like, I think she wanted someone who was like brassy like she is, and I think we wanted to make sure this girl had like a lot of teenage rage and just had a temper and like was petulant and didn't have like a fully formed brain, like was just like spontaneous and like impulsive and made a lot of mistakes and lied. But you get why she does it, because she's so deeply insecure. And like, that's like a lot of teenage girls that I know were just like, I have big dreams and I have like a lot of thoughts and a lot of imagination, but I'm, like also very scared of everything in the world and like mad at my parents all the time. And, like you're just a ball of emotion. So we wanted to make her a big personality who had a temper. And, we wanted to, basically the story of us getting that show, like on the air was that, Netflix, one of the reps at Netflix, like loved Mindy's books that were like her essays, and liked some of the stories about her as a teen, and kind of was like, hey, would you like to make a show, kind of a period piece about yourself as a teenager? And she was like, I like don't think that my like adventures as a teen, I think I was pretty boring. Like nothing happened to me. I like did,
Let's get the diaries out. They're not very interesting.
Yeah, she was like, I didn't have any boyfriends. I like after school went and sat in my mom's like doctor office and like, she was just like, and I think she felt specifically that it would be more exciting to do something today with all of the like social media and all the like trappings of technology and whatnot. And so we just kind of pitched this character that had a little bit of her and a little bit of me. But we also thought it would be interesting to give her like a deep wound and to give her pain that was being sort of displaced in favor of this like relentless pursuit for popularity and a hot boyfriend. And I think it's like that is a lot of times what teenagers are actually doing. Like I think they have like things that, stuff going on at home, or they have their own insecurities, or they have like other things they're ashamed of or whatever, and like they kind of shelve it and then like focus on the teenagery stuff, like the fun stuff, like boyfriends and blah blah blah. And I think we felt like it would give her pursuit of this popularity mission more depth, and would give the family more depth because they're really grieving and trying to get through it. And a lot of that was, based on like my family's experience, because I had younger siblings who were teenagers when my dad passed away, and we all were like so rocked. But the younger the children in my family were, that like when he died, the more they were in like straight up denial and like ready and like desperate to just go do high school stuff. And so I think I found that so interesting, and so like very human. And so I think that's where we kind of started with her.
Well, I think it's so difficult to, have that comedy and have that heart. So I think that's why your shows resonated with so many people, is because you're able to balance both. Because sometimes you watch a show and it's just like jokes all the time, nothing's happening, you know. But I mean, I love Never Have I Ever particularly as well. But so my next question is, what is your writing process? Do you have a snack you eat, music you listen to, or a particular time of day that you write, since you both are obviously prolific writers?
Morning, Cliff Bar, Marvel movie soundtracks.
Wow, we're going to all do that program now, Melinda.
It's just for me. I can't listen to music with lyrics because I start listening to the lyrics.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so,
Right.
and then I really like Cliff Bars. And I'm a
Very
morning person. I mean,
efficient.
it's not that mysterious.
Lang, is this your program as well?
You know, it's so interesting. I think I also am a little better in the mornings. I mean, honestly, I will eat the entire fridge when I'm writing, because I'll do anything but actually sit down at the computer to write. I'll just be like, oh, I need to make a hoagie or whatever. And after I eat that, I'm like, man, I'll cook a pie. I don't know. And I'll have written one letter on the page. But yeah, my writing process, I mean, honestly, it's interesting because, I'm always kind of curious about the difference between drama rooms and comedy rooms. But comedy rooms, you're really writing all day together. And so it's it's a less of a solo act. You're kind of just all sitting there looking at each other and looking at the same screen. And then when you go off to write your first draft of a script, then that's a whole different thing. But I think I'd probably do a little better in the mornings. The end of the day, I tend to kind of start to space out and research vacations or things
I
on
feel
my...
like I'm on your writing program, unfortunately, Lang. I needed the Cliff Bar, though, next.
Yeah.
So we're all Columbia alum here, so I'm going to ask you some Columbia questions. Melinda, what was your favorite course, or who was your favorite professor at School of the Arts when you were there?
I'm glad you asked that, and I'm glad I had a chance to think about it. June Stein taught an acting class that I loved, and she was this fiery, very petite woman who was just so forthright and was very unabashed about putting me together in a scene with a guy who I kind of liked a little bit, and she just was so amused.
What
She's
will
pulling
you
the
do today
strings.
to
No, I mean,
Melinda?
he was married. It wasn't like that at all. She just thought it was fun. And no, it was nothing like that. Demure. But the other class that I liked a lot was Ira Deutschmann's producing class, and he
amazing.
taught it with a couple of other professors whose names I'm blanking on. There was, I want to say, Mike Hausman or something like that, and then I'm totally blanking on the last guy, Richard somebody. But they were great, and they were very nuts and bolts, but they were very entertaining people. You could tell that they had to just kind of read rooms and interact with real folks, all kinds of walks of life, to get the thing done. And I remember one of them was talking about how Natalie Wood, when filming, I guess it was Brainstorm, what's it called? When the boat accident happened. And he was talking about insurance, and he said that the insurance policy had triggered because she could not report to work that morning because she had drowned. And that's just
Oh my God.
cut and dried. But I think that was how, he wasn't trying to be insensitive about it. He was just recalling the details of how he filled out the report, I think. It was just a really interesting filter on this part of movie making that was so real world and so kind of we can all moon about in rags and talk about our visions and be auteurs, but this guy finds the place to park the trucks. He gets it done, and that impressed me,
Wow. And so, Lang, you went to Columbia College. So my question for you is, what was your favorite core curriculum class? and I had looked them up again, which was Contemporary Civ, Lit Hum, University Writing. I think it was called Logic and Rhetoric
Yes,
when
it
we
was
were there.
called Logic and Rhetoric.
Art Humanities, Music Humanities, and it says Frontiers of Science, but I think it was just called Science and Math when we were there.
Yeah, I don't remember Frontiers of Science.
We also had the swimming requirement
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I did the swimming.
That was my favorite, the swimming.
Loved that swimming requirement. Well, I also did a very funny swimming requirement because I decided I feel like my parents were late on paying my tuition all the time, and so I was always the last person to sign up for classes, so I could never get into any of the good PE classes. And so I was I shall do kayaking. And kayaking
amazing.
kayaking was once a week in the pool. Like, and you like
You're in
had
New
to
York
like,
City,
you would just
yeah.
like flip over and like flip back up and then kind of paddle around. But to do kayaking, you had to do an even more intense swim test.
Oh, God.
And like it was like I can't remember what was the actual swim test was what you had to like swim there and back
You had to do like
3 times
three. It was 3 or 4 lengths. Yeah.
long. Yeah, on that Olympic pool. So like the kayaking swim test.
Oh, what
This
was
is
that?
was you had to do the 3 laps, but then you had to do one of the laps you had to be underwater for almost all of it. And then you had to tread water for like 10 minutes.
You were auditioning for Avatar.
Yeah. I know. I was like, this is so hard. Why did I do this? It's like my PEs were kayaking and badminton. I was like, all I wanted to do was be in like yoga. Although I was great at badminton. I was quite good at. I was not great at kayaking.
But yes, your favorite core
Of
class.
the core class. Sorry, my favorite core class. I really liked. I'm not a musical person, but I liked music hum because I like found it so interesting. And when I was there, they gave you like 10 CDs that you had to like. It was like you got like a giant. It was like all the great Western European classical works like in a giant CD set
They
that you
must
just.
have implemented the year after me because I did not get that link.
You didn't get the big CD set?
Did not. I feel like I'm missing out.
Yeah. I was like, well, I put it in my Case Logic next to all my other cool CDs. And I remember there was one term that I still remember, which was that I love. It's like my favorite word is Gesamtkunstwerk from Wagner. Anyway, means total work of art. It's about his operas. That they are like a total work of art. It's like music, acting, set design. It's a whole thing. Gesamtkunstwerk.
Tonight, when we network, we're going to use that word.
Yeah. Gesamtkunstwerk.
So unfortunately, we have to come to a close. And so I wanted to ask you, I know there's staffed writers in the audience as well as emerging writers. What's some advice you can give and what do you wish you had known either when you graduated from Columbia College or from School of the Arts that now you know today?
Be intentional about where you put your energy. I think that it's possible to come out here and do a lot of things and mistake being busy for making progress. And I think you have to set aside time to write, even when you don't feel like it or you think what you're writing is crap or, you don't have time. It's almost certain that at least one of those things will be in play when you're writing. So you need to develop the skill to push through anyway. And you have to complete things. I think it's really important to complete things and then revise them. I got really good advice at one point, like when you revise something, don't just, move things around and massage it because you're just laterally, making it different instead of better. Have, like, let's say 5 goals. I'm going to make it 5 pages shorter. I'm going to bring out the romance between the 2 leads. I'm going to make it funnier. I'm going to, jazz up this action sequence, and I'm going to give it a great teaser. So once you've done that, you've made the thing better, not just different. The other thing that I wish I had known, and actually this was sort of my answer to the showrunner thing, when you realize what your North Star is, go towards that, because anything else is lateral bullshit. I had this epiphany from a friend of mine who was a retired, he's honorably discharged. He's now a TV writer, but he had been an Army Ranger. And I was like, oh, I noticed that you have a wedding ring on. Congratulations. We hadn't seen each other in a minute. And I said, how did this come about? And he said, well, I met this really nice woman. And we'd been pretty serious for about 6 months. Both of us had apartments where the leases were coming up. And I said, how about this? I'm going to buy a house. And I would love to not drive back and forth between residences. How about you move in with me? If we get married, half the house will be yours. If we break up, you can move out. And they were married with 2 kids, And so I was like, it's like, take the hill, go towards the hill. Am I moving towards that or not? It's a binary question.
Great advice.
That is great advice. I'm like, oh no, that's really good. I think that for me, there's a few things. I think the first thing I would say is, like, for those of you who are on staffs and those of you who aren't, like, it's what I said earlier. It's like, allow yourself to fail, like allow yourself to mess up, but you have to try. You have to, if you're in a comedy room, if you're in a drama room, like, you have to try. You have to pitch If people don't like what you pitch, it's fine. You're learning. You are actually learning while you're there, and you're like picking it up. I think one thing about writing that's tricky is you feel like it's an extension of your personality and also your intellect. Like, you think that if you write something bad, it means you're stupid and unable to do anything good. And it's not. Writing is a practice like anything else. And it is, because it is so technical. I mean, even joke writing is technical. And that means there's technique. And you have to learn it. And it's hard to do that, like, just alone in the ether. Like, it's, so if you're on a staff, you just keep pitching, keep trying. If you're not on a staff, what I would say is, like, I think back to when I first moved out here, and I had some other friends who were aspiring screenwriters, and I remember, like, when I would, write something, and if it kind of wasn't working, I'd throw it out. And that was like what I learned at the Onion. I was like, just get rid of it. And I remember I had a couple friends who were working on the same screenplay for a decade, and that it never happened. And it's like, you have to do more, and you can't like cling to one thing and like not move forward, not evolve. Like, you just have to. You have to be writing a lot, but you also should really get a community of other writers and make people read your work and talk about it and like take criticism and try other people's ideas. I mean, one thing that's like a main thing that showrunners are constantly have to do is like, you're on the phone with executives and they're like, we don't like this. You have to like change it. And you can't, I mean, you can sometimes put up a fight if you really feel it passionately, but a lot of times you have to be like, okay, back to the drawing board. Like, I gotta like rethink this and start over and like make it better and make it good. And so if you are writing without getting any criticism right now, then you are in stasis. Like, you gotta like share what you're doing with other people and get feedback, and just not be scared of it. You will get better.
I really love that.
Right.
Okay, so both of you, after your answers, I've not been writing enough, but I will start tonight.
Wait, I thought of a couple more things. Proofread for
perfect.
typos. Definitely proofread. People don't proofread enough. It's really important. If I get pulled out of a script on page 2 because there's all many typos, I'll never know how brilliant it was because I'll get frustrated. And then one thing that I really wish I had known, this was advice from a therapist. Also, therapy is great. Everybody should be in therapy. Seriously. And then this therapist said, I think that you're like trying to achieve all the time. You're trying to prove yourself. You're trying to feel like, because I, am X, Y, and Z, then I have to work harder. I have to, be deserving because of my work, basically. And he said, consider the possibility that you have achieved this success, or, in other words, you're worthy of love, not in spite of who you are, but because of who you are. And I think that's really important to hold on to.
That was really nice.
Such a good,
This is not as emotional, but this is one other tip that I would say is, especially if you're not on a staff right now, just try in any way, shape, like to go forward and get closer to a writer's room. And that means, like, my first job at The Onion was as their casting director.
Oh,
like,
wow.
they didn't have money to hire the writer, like a writing staff, but they were putting together a little production team for their online videos. And so all of the writers took jobs, except for like a couple who had been there longer, but several of us took jobs as in production. And so I was the casting director, and I don't know if you know who Chris Kelly is, but he was like the head writer on SNL and had created the other two. He was the locations manager, and every single little like production like niche had a writer in it, and so I was a full-time casting director for a couple years, where I was like hauling a camera over to a little theater and like auditioning actors all day long. And then I would like write at night and then and then they would like use my headlines. But it's like, don't sit around and just like wait to be staffed, like make your way, because frankly, a lot of these staffing jobs are are people who are recommended by other people to these staffs, and that's not great, but that is how it happens because those spots are so precious that when you are the showrunner, if there's someone you respect and trust who's like, this kid is great, he's really funny, he's gonna like knock it out of the park, then you're gonna meet with that person and be like, okay, let me see and let me read their stuff. And the other last practical thing, and then I'll shut up, is
we're loving all of it.
It's like, this is either going to make me look like a really bad showrunner. Melinda's going to be like, that's incorrect. But for your samples, like, no one I know reads the whole sample because everyone samples. You get so many. And so you need to write something good in, like, just to be safe, those first 5 pages. You need to, like, be clear what the show is. You need to have if it's a comedy, a bunch of jokes. If it's a drama, a bunch of interesting plot moves and character development. Don't be like, oh, when they get to page 28, they're in for a real treat. It's like, they're not getting there. No one's getting there. So it's like, you're like, what I am looking for in scripts is like an interesting premise that feels specific, and that doesn't mean it's like set on Mars. It means that it's like something specific that feels authentic. So if it's like a life experience from you, or if it's in a setting that's sort of like interesting, like give me like something that feels like new and interesting, that also feels like you're not trying too hard. And the like yeah, if you're just like, it's
an easy balance.
Just like, well, for instance, like why my like former assistant, who is now a writer, she was like, she wrote this spec and she was like, can you please look at it and give me your thoughts? And it was like about a graphic designer in Los Angeles and her roommates. And I was like, Carly, what is like, it was just like bland. It was like she was trying to write a thing she thought like people would like because it's about like just young people working and having roommates. And I was like, and she has like such a more interesting life and comes from this very funny, weird Midwestern family. And I was like, write about them, like write that, like. Do you know how many scripts I get that are like funny roommates who live in Los Angeles and like write at work at a magazine? It's like nobody even buys magazines anymore. Like, it's just like, do something that you're like, oh, I'm curious. I want to know what's happening here. Yeah. This was long-winded, but
no, but I think what you're saying.
I believe
first 5 pages.
It is correct.
Thank you, Melinda.
Wow, you got.
No, I mean, it's kind of like at least the opening. It doesn't have to be 5 pages, but definitely the opening. And I think specific is better than complex usually, and it's kind of like, it's wonderful if it's complex and you kind of realize at the end, oh wow, this was all a puzzle within a puzzle. That's really cool, but it needs to be pulling you along the way. I agree.
I think also what you're both saying is, I mean, both of you have such different backgrounds, but you wrote specific to your voice, and that's kind of what has taken you to where you are now, which is very high, by the way. So it's worked out well. So we have a special guest who I wanted to introduce. Sorry, we're going to pull him up because our evening, I wish I could talk to you forever, but we're on a tight timetable, and it's time to have some Shappy Pretzels. But so I want to introduce our special guest. It is Adam Shapiro from Never Have I Ever. Yes. And do you mind just? We're gonna grab this,
Okay.
And then we'll turn on your microphone.
All right. Oh yeah.
Yes, it's just a power.
Yeah,
button.
nice.
Okay.
What's up, everybody? Hi, Lang.
Hi,
I was on Medium once. Yeah. I played a barista. And literally, and my boss died. And I stumbled upon her when I was going to get the coffee for the day.
I think I remember this episode. Was this the one where Allison dreamed that she had a kid that and it actually had been a miscarriage, and she was remembering this past
I
memory?
didn't watch all of the
You
episode.
didn't watch the rest of it?
I was super busy. I was working in 17 restaurants at the time. No, but by the way, this room looks like something you could choose on the virtual reality goggles as like something to, like you could be like, oh, the red screening room. That's a fun. No one's on the VR. It's the future. And then Patricia comes in and throws a trash can through the glass.
I think I remember that one, seriously.
Yeah. That was me. Yeah, barista number 2, literally. There was another barista in the scene.
Appropriately terrified.
Like, you had to have 2 baristas in the scene, but I get it. You know what I mean? We were kind of each other's
So
yin
you can't
yang.
tell. Adam is also very demure, just like you, Melinda.
Very. I do not belong on this panel. I went to University of Maryland. I just baked a bunch of pretzels, and then you told me to bring them.
Well, so I'm so glad I got to pair Melinda and Lang together because they had some really interesting similarities. And then I thought, well, wait, Lang does Never Have I Ever, and I know Adam, so let's just have him do the pretzels. And and since he is amazing as Mr. Shapiro on Never Have I Ever, let's have him answer a couple questions.
Okay, shoot.
So my question for you, I think we talked about how you met Mindy Kaling initially when you were cast on the Mindy Project.
Yeah.
And did you meet Lang at the same time?
Do we meet one that?
I don't know.
I think it was like a
Stas
Stas and Ike episode.
Yeah, I don't think I was on set for that episode.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed.
It was fun. It was awesome.
But so then how did Never Have I Ever come to you?
Oh, you probably know the answer better than I do. I just got a phone call saying I had to go to audition for something called Mr. Shapiro, and I was like, I have to fucking audition?
When we
It's already called Mr. Shapiro.
No, it was funny because when we were talking about this character, I was like, you know what would be funny? Is that guy Adam Shapiro was like the weird date you went on on the Mindy Project, and I think we may have called him Mr. Shapiro because of you. And then like we just like got our round of auditions, and you were like the third one up, and I was like, and you nailed it, and I was like, yeah, he's perfect.
You're like, who would have?
Yeah, no, I had the audition, and then I was shooting this show called The Good Lord Bird in Virginia at the same time, and I guess like I don't know if you remember this, but rumor was that I was like not available to do Never Ever Ever, which I didn't know, and then Mindy DM'd me on Twitter and was like, "Are you not gonna do this?" And I was like, "What? Of course I am. I will like fly myself back and forth every night if I have to." And so it worked out, and so I got to do both, and it was,
Amazing.
that ended up being my kind of what it felt. The all 4 seasons, I was kind of flying back and forth a lot, and you guys were so cool about
Because
it.
you work all the time.
Oh, please. It was great. It's great.
Adam is a very funny Instagram story where he shows that all of his characters carry a
unbelievable.
shoulder bag.
It is unbelievable.
Just like a leather,
Messenger
like
bag,
smart
yeah.
man shoulder bag. And it was like he did a montage and he's always just like talking, wearing a shoulder bag. And it's so funny. It really made me laugh.
It was actually a comment on my Instagram. Somebody said, "Do you ever do parts where you don't wear a messenger bag?" And I was like, what a weird thing to say. And then I started going through all the footage from the last 20 years, and it was like 80% of the roles I'd played. And it's funny because messenger bags are given to you not by costumes, not at the fitting. It's given to you by props, which is like the last thing before you shoot. So, like, I've done the audition, the callback, we've rehearsed, we've done the table reads, the costume fitting, blocking, everything. No messenger bag. And then, like, all right, let's shoot. And then somebody's like, all right, and this is for you. And I'm like, oh, shit, I got to wear this? How am I going to take it off? And when I have to...
They know
And it's always going right over the microphone, too. So then the mic guy comes over and says, you're wearing the messenger bag? And I'm like, I didn't... It's not my... They just put it on me. And then, we need sound needs a second to adjust the mic because of the strap. It's a whole thing. But I was glad somebody pointed it out because now it's become like a little bit of a trademark. And if you go see She Said, a wonderful movie that's in the theaters now.
Also co-written by a Columbia alum.
Is that right? That's
No, based on a book co-written by a Columbia alum,
Jodie Cantor, who plays my...
The New York Times investigative
Yes,
journalist
I play her
journalist.
husband in the movie, Jodie's husband, Ron Lieber, who's also a New York Times journalist. And in the last scene I was shooting in the movie, guy comes over and puts a messenger bag on me, and Zoe Kazan goes, ah! Ah! And I was like, oh my God!
Like, I did not recognize you
This
until
is
this moment.
Yeah, it was insane. I didn't even realize when he did it. It was amazing. So you check that movie out, too. By the way, it's good.
Yes,
it's good.
it is also based on a book by a Columbia alum.
So that answers your question. I don't even remember what the question was.
It did. I'm sure it did.
Okay.
And so my second question is, I rewatched a lot of. I mean, I watched Never Have I Ever like twice already, but I rewatched it for the panel. And just you in the pilot like cracked me up so much because your body language when you introduce yourself as like the history teacher and you say facing history and ourselves, and then you like let the class go and you like kick a trash can. Is this scripted?
Yeah. All right. So one of my favorite things about Never Have I Ever is it was I say was because we finished, but it was like the easiest job ever because I didn't have to do anything. I never improvised on that show. Everything was written perfectly. Every episode I was just given these gems. Really, the hardest part was just like, don't get in the way. You know, like, don't fuck it up. Don't try to make too much of it. Right. Like, Lang always gave me great notes where it was like, we got it. We got the joke. Just fucking say the words. You know what I mean?
That's how I am on set.
Yeah. You didn't curse, but
directing.
No, I just, like, I learned to trust on this show that like it was so funny and so tightly written that I didn't have to do much, and I was used to over the past 20 years. Like a lot of times I get hired on shows where they're like, "Please make it funny." Like it's not funny. Make it fun. Like I was just doing this thing, The Continental, which is this John Wick prequel series for Peacock, and I was shooting it like all year in Budapest, and I kept flying home to do season 4. And they were like, you got hired on this to make it funny. Like, it was all improv. And I was just so stressed every day of, like, how do I improvise, like, 1970s John Wick type dialogue? It's just not me. I don't even know anything about guns. The whole show is about guns. You were saying that, and I was like, oh, God, I'm adding to the culture. But it is literally a gun franchise. So I was just always so stressed on that show, although it was really fun. And then I would get
the opposite, by the way, of what Melinda does on Nancy Drew. So
no guns, yeah.
Watch out.
Yeah, exactly. And then I get to Never Have I Ever, and it's just like all I have to do is just say these jokes, and then everybody on the street tells me how funny I was, and I was like, I didn't even.
You're like very specific. I mean, you're underselling what you do on it because you are so funny.
I never improvised any words.
You did,
but I did a lot of improvising of movement, like kicking over that trash can in that scene was like improvised. That was not.
Yeah, that was
in the script, but I did a lot of improvising of like.
You also just have like a very funny delivery. I mean, like when you're like in the like Pacoima trash park with your like pussy hat on, being like throwing like a condom in front of all their faces. Like, I don't know. You just have like your delivery is very,
well, that was the other
always
thing.
Wonderful.
Never have I ever always put me in the funniest clothing and like t-shirts. And it was literally like, all I had to do was just show up. It was already so funny. So, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to close with one final question for Melinda and Lang. So obviously just even watching, like just speaking to Adam, he speaks in a very specific way, and you both knew your cast members for so long. Was it just like flowing from you because you knew the speech patterns of the actors? Or how did you first get under their skin, and then how did it go along and get infused with the actual actors?
Yeah, I do like to talk to actors and just like I'm pretending to make small talk, which I am making small talk, but I'm also listening to their cadence, I hear that some of them, don't listen to this bit, some of them, they may stumble over certain words, or they may have a real facility with, lots of words that you wouldn't have. Oh, I remember now in the pilot, Nick was very, articulate in a way that you didn't expect from what his backstory was. Mm-hmm. And it was wonderful, and we could lean into that. And I would, try to remind myself sometimes writing those scenes like, oh, he's the guy who actually had 2 years to do nothing but study. And then we would Zoom with them frequently, and there are other people who, when you hang out with them, like Riley Smith, who I love, he played Ryan, who is a kind of tortured and, very conflicted, morally gray character in season 1, and gradually he just got sunnier and sunnier and sunnier, because that's what Riley is. He's wonderful as a person. And I remember the cast dinner that we had when we were filming the pilot. I heard him talking to the other. This is the best eavesdrop when they don't realize you're eavesdropping. Because he was kind of like, yeah, guys, I know it's like a 7-year contract and it's like all these episodes, but you know, you do it and they pay you and then we'll be rich, yo! And all of the rest of them were like angst-ridden about, what about my theater career? And I was like, you know, so I frequently remember, you know, then we'll be rich, yo, was really like his core of where he lived. So I would just nudge his dialogue in that direction.
That's amazing.
I mean, I think for comedies, you have to figure out where people score. And I always think that, like, I think there's like 2 types of characters. There are comedy characters. It's like you're either funny because you're high status or you're funny because you're low status. And like Mr. Shapiro is a very funny low status character. Like he like wants to be cool and he keeps like kind of getting like shit on. But then there's like people who are like high status characters who are very like who like score because they are like they're better than everyone else. Or like for instance like on our show, like the character of Trent, who is like a fan favorite, he's like high status. Like you can't knock him down. He's like, I mean, he's sort of like a stoner, but he's unaffected by anyone, and like kind of like tells everyone else like what losers they are. And it's like you'd have to find out how people score and like what and I think also the cadence of how they deliver jokes. And a lot of times that's you have to like there's some real learning curve in those first few episodes because you're like writing like I think like we were for Ramona Young who plays Eleanor Wong, like in our brains when we wrote the character we wrote her a little more like sort of Jane Krakowski on 30 Rock. Like she's just like I'm into theater, you know, like and Ramona is like such a more like unique and like kind of weird ethereal person who's sort of like is like kind of like on a different planet sometimes in the most amazing way, and like she scores like in a very different way than like Jane Krakowski does. And so you have to like kind of figure out how a person has crafted their character, but also like how they can sell a joke.
Right.
You know.
This is so interesting though, where you said how people score, and that's such an interesting way to think about character. So we are going to move to the reception portion of our evening, but Lang and Melinda, this was unbelievable. You obviously are both so smart, not just because you went to Columbia. And so let's give a big round of applause for.
Thank you so much for coming. It's
Thank
so
you.
nice that people showed up.
And we'll be serving Shappy pretzel snacks. Adam, do you want to really quickly tell people how you
Really quickly.
created this company?
That's my thing. Really quick stories. No, I when the pandemic started and we stopped shooting Never Have I Ever, I had a 2-year-old who's now a 5-year-old, and my wife was pregnant with our now 2-year-old, and I was like, what am I gonna do with this 2-year-old in lockdown? And so we started baking and cooking. And I'm from Philadelphia, and I was like, we should make Philly pretzels. I've never seen someone make a Philly pretzel in their kitchen. Because in Philly, they're everywhere. You don't have to make them. Yeah. And so we started making them. And then my wife replaces Kelly Ripa every time Kelly Ripa goes on vacation. So she like hosts the show. Her name's Katie Lowe's. If you've ever seen Scandal, she plays Quinn, or Inventing Anna, she plays Rachel. She's the best. She's awesome. I tricked her into marrying me 10 years ago. And so she was hosting a week of Ryan and Kelly as Kelly, and it was in our house. It was a Zoom broadcast nationally, and Seacrest was like, and it's like 5 a.m. and I'm her only producer. I'm like putting the lights on her and the camera. Different story. And Seacrest was like, what have you guys been snacking on during your quarantine? And my wife was like, oh, my husband's obsessed with trying to make a Philly pretzel. So then I just jumped on TV and was like, yo, Seacrest, I'm bringing you pretzels tomorrow. And so I dropped them off, and he ate them on the air, and he was like, these are the best pretzels. Everybody needs to buy Shappy's pretzels. He called me Shappy because I was his PA when I first moved out here, which goes along, just get in the door, and then you will become what it is you want to do. I wasn't trying to be Seacrest's PA. Although that was cool. I was trying to be an actor.
What makes a pretzel a Philly pretzel?
Oh, yeah. So Philly pretzels, That's a really good question. So it's a little bit the flavor, but it's very much the shape. So when pretzels came over from Europe in the 1600s, and they came into the Pennsylvania Dutch colonies up in Lancaster in Pennsylvania, they realized that like the Bavarian shaped pretzels, you could only fit like 2 of those on one sheet pan, and they have to like transport all these pretzels to Philly to sell them. So they squished the Bavarian shape down, turned it, and then baked them touching each other. And then you rip them apart like you would a cinnamon bun. That's a Philly pretzel. And also the other pretzels are bullshit. That's a Philly pretzel. So we started making these pretzels, and then Seacrest ate them on air, and he was like, everybody needs to buy Shappy's pretzels. And I was like, and I was back on TV again, second morning in a row. You know, my mother was felling, and I was like, there's no company. It's not, no one can buy these. And he's like, well, there should be. So I just went on the web, and I bought shappypretzel.com, and I just wrote, yo, your mall's pretzel can go fuck itself. Shappy Pretzel. And if you click that, you followed Shappy Pretzel's Instagram, which told you that this was not an actual pretzel company, but if we ever did become one, we would let you know.
Yes, because you first sold them out of your house.
Yes.
I actually waited in your driveway.
You came to my driveway.
Bought 6 pretzels.
You did. And so people started coming to my driveway to buy these pretzels, and I was like, I said to Katie, I'm like, is it a bad idea to just invite strangers to our house during like the height of the pandemic when no one was going anywhere? And she was like, whatever's going to kind of get you out of like my face. So I started making the pretzels. People were coming to the thing. And then every Philly celebrity that was going back to work was buying them for their sets, like Bradley Cooper and like Will Smith and stuff.
Mini Shappy pretzels.
So yeah, I just made the little pretzel
the
bites.
reception.
Some of them are cinnamon sugar. Some of them are classic salt. They're in bags. They're waiting for you guys. There's also our mustard packs that have 2 different flavors in one pack. Not a big deal. And that's that.
Yes. and
Did I
so-
do that in less than 5 minutes?
Did not, but that's okay. Okay, but so we're gonna move to the reception now. We'll see you out there. I'm sure a lot of you want to say hello to our panelists. We're gonna do some quick photos with them and some Q stuff, but we will see you out there, and we look forward to socializing. Oh, and I did want to point out, can our Q board members just stand up that are in the audience so you can? So we have Jackie, Ricardo, Kurt, and Austin. Austin is also my co-president and a prolific writer for the Wondery podcast, but we're all doing very different, interesting things. So come find us, say hello. Let us know if you also want to get more involved. And we'll see you out at the reception. Thank you.
In Columbia.